Hey everybody, this is our July Steeltoe community meeting. We are going to get started. Let me share my screen here, put the agenda notes up. So quick introduction. Just want to reiterate some of the things we have out here for support community. We do have our meeting agenda notes. They're on our community site on Steeltoe.io. It's a community link, and that kind of guides you through our meeting notes, which is what this is, and also you can add your add anything to the agenda if you'd like. Also just recently added, this is good news, we added our Steeltoe YouTube channel, which will contain all of the meetings recordings and keep them going. Anything else that we have related to Steeltoe, hopefully have some demonstrations out there soon. Get that going too. And really good news is we just had our Steeltoe 3.1 release just today, actually, probably about 15 minutes ago. So congratulations to the team. That's a really big release. We've been working on this one for a while. Introduced some really cool new features. One of them is Steeltoe Stream with Rabbit and Q. So that's one of the latest features we've added. Definitely worth taking a look at. We did go over this in our last meeting. But Dave and Hanania went over what Stream was and what our Rabbit and Q messaging looked like. So worth taking a look at. So look on the Steeltoe YouTube channel for the last meeting and you can check it out there. We also have support for Spring Cloud Data Flow. So that's our basically our interoperability with Spring Java components and our .NET components now that we just recently added with using Steeltoe Stream. And I guess would you call that the orchestration, Dave? Is that what you call that, the data flow?
Yeah, data flow provides orchestration of microservices that do data pipelines from those microservices.
Thanks. And then we also added our Steeltoe Bootstrap feature. That is basically almost auto wiring a lot of the Steeltoe components. So worth taking a look at is our new blog that should be out in a little bit here. I don't have a link directly to it. Let's kind of goes over a lot of this. No, it's not available yet. Probably in a few minutes I'll be able to show that to you. Kind of goes over our Steeltoe Bootstrap is actually auto configuration of Steeltoe components. So before you had to add a lot of commands to add each Steeltoe component explicitly. Now it kind of reads the what you have allocated or what packages you've imported, and then bootstraps that for you. And there's also a ton of other fixes and updates, many from the community and also from the Steeltoe team. And also updated our open telemetry to use the latest and greatest from that team, from the open source project. And I think we're at 1.1 version of open telemetry. Let's see. Well, I guess we can go over a little bit here. The open issues. You can still click on this link here. It'll take you to our Steeltoe issues page. Several of them are tagged with good first issues, just to get you started on working on or contributing to Steeltoe. You also have our help wanted issues, which are sometimes they're also good first issues. They also can be a little bit more detailed, but really good intro tickets to get you started. Love to have some more community contributors. And like I just mentioned, the 3.1 was released today, and we just had a 2.5.4 a few weeks ago. And our 3.02 has been out for a while, which added that .NET 5 compatibility and a few other bug fixes. And let's see, our events coming up, we have Spring 1 in September. Hope we have a few talks there around .NET. and also VMworld. It's coming up soon too. And let's see what else. These are our discussions from last time. I think they were just left here. You guys want to continue?
Well, yeah, the book I've got some stuff to talk about.
Okay. Well, go ahead, Dave. You want to start now, and we'll. I also
Yeah.
did want to jump back to a couple sections up here. I know Tim wanted to talk a little bit about the Bootstrap functionality and open telemetry updates, and also the Initializer, which is what Chris is going to talk about, and some of the big updates that are happening there, and some really nice stuff he's been working on. So go ahead if you want to start now with the book discussion.
Sure. And so now that this is being recorded, let me just go on the record by saying Chris is now going to be referred to as Beardy McBeardster from now on. He is no longer Chris. Okay? That beard is impressive, buddy. Okay, the book. So the publisher, the Alok is his name, our rep, I guess, with the packet. He gave me kind of a template that they use to do outlines of the book. And so their approach here is you got to really define the outline pretty well, like pretty in depth before ever getting into writing any content, because they like to do a little bit of review internally to make sure, the book's going to cover what things are good and, they agree with it and all that good stuff. So I've gotten through that. Yeah, I'm going to share this. I've gotten through that. And now he's just dead set on understanding who's going to be a part of this, who's going to be contributing. And I keep saying, like, this is just going to be a community effort. And let's just get in and start, and whatever happens, happens. And he's having a very hard time with this. So what's being asked of me is for each of the sections, for each of the chapters, or each of the headings or anything, put some names on there, tag some people. And I'm like, I'm not going to sign anybody up for this. Again, it's a community effort for it, but it apparently he's just hung up on it. I guess it's their process. So if you guys are okay with it, I would just like to quickly run through this. And please, I'm going to put names on this. Please do not feel like you're fully signed up for writing this, right? The intention is to basically skeleton out each of the sections with quite a bit of information, and then ask that expert to come in and fill in the gaps and put in all the dirty details and everything of it. That's our approach here. But anyway, if you guys are okay with it, so the basic layout of this is the first section, the first part is going to be how Steeltoe. Can you guys see this? Okay, you want me to zoom in? We're going to talk about how Steeltoe got started, the relationship of Steeltoe to the Spring Framework, and then some goals of the project, pain points that we're trying to solve, that sort of thing. This is going to be pretty high level, right? Not a whole lot of coding and everything in there. That will take us over to chapter 2, which is getting started. And so this is more about the project, and this is adding Steeltoe to your project. So this is more of a, hands-on. We're in NuGets. Here's the pre-release versions. Here's the full release versions, talking about those kinds of things. Maybe showing someone how to add the repo, the NuGet repo, to a project manually. Then we'll get into Steeltoe Initializer, and pretty in-depth there, talking about that. I felt like that could almost get its own chapter, but Alok was just really set on that being a part of this chapter of getting started. And then actually showing some code about, here are some recommended components that we would say just about every microservice should have, and why that is, and show, adding that in. And that may be, that's probably not Bootstrapper doing that. We'll probably just manually call out these different things, just trying to be really obvious there. I don't know. Any thoughts? Anything? I'm going to keep going.
Looks good.
Beardy McBeardster, what do you got?
No, I was going to say, that sounds reasonable.
Okay. And then the part 2 of the book is more of a reference as I'm seeing it. It's going to be less storytelling and more about, all the components. So each chapter in this part is more or less look at the docs navigation, how it's broken down into components, and you're going to follow that almost perfectly throughout here. There were a few things that I had to combine, but almost perfectly. So we go through the bootstrapping and all that. Then we go to app config, circuit breakers, distributed tracing. So within these are just sections about talking about, why do you have this? What does it mean? How do I add it to the project? Getting more in depth as things go for each of these. Dynamic logging. So some of these chapters, like when you get into, when you get into talking about each of the endpoints, messaging and streams, Alok asked me to combine those chapters together, and I was a bit reluctant there. We kind of agreed to just see where it went, but messaging and streams, this is going to be a pretty sizable chapter, right? If Tillman has anything to do with this, this is going to be freaking 100 pages right here talking about this. So some of these chapters are going to be smaller than others for sure. Service connectors, discovery, these are in alphabetical order. Securing applications with Cloud Foundry, and that's the end of it. So it's just each of the components getting pretty in depth, like taking the documentation, but going not far beyond that, but definitely beyond what the documentation is. So with that, I'll pause. Anybody got any comments or questions or anything? Tillman?
Yeah, so a couple comments. One is on the messaging and streams. Of course, that's top of mind right now. I would, if it were me, I would look at potentially bringing it up, breaking chapter. I know he resisted this, but create something on event-based microservices, which would be more based on messaging, and then show how streams can be used in that kind of application as an additional abstraction layer. And then add another chapter that's all about data processing applications and something around data ingest and how with the Steeltoe 3.1 and beyond, you'll be able to create these new types of data processing applications built on something like Spring Cloud Dataflow, and you'll be able to completely build them in a polyglot way, meaning you can leverage off-the-shelf components from Java and Spring, and then you can bring your own .NET versions of whatever you need in order to build those.
So what I'm thinking is, you make a good point, and the second part of the book is really all reference, and I think what you're talking about is more applied. Why do you want to do these things? So I'm kind of tempted up here in the first part of the book, in the second chapter where we're talking about adding Steeltoe to the project using Steeltoe Initializer, what I'm tempted to say is, let's do a section about like recommended components for microservices, and then do an event streaming with Steeltoe, and dedicate some space to talking about event streaming with Steeltoe, and dedicate some space about data pipelines with Steeltoe. That sort of thing. So I'm not going to give it an outright chapter because I feel like that's kind of a lot for this. But I think that I totally agree that I think there is something to be said for it, and it's more of a story, right, than a reference or anything. It's why do I do this? How do you do it with Steeltoe? What are the components you're going to use? That sort of thing, right?
I mean, I guess what I'm trying to get at is it's a significant deal with 3.1 where we've added essentially 2 new types of applications that you can now author with Steeltoe components. And one is event-based microservices, and the other is data processing pipeline type applications. And I just was suggesting that somehow you get that incorporated in here, and then show somewhere in a chapter about how you write these things, right? How you write an event-based microservice using Steeltoe, and how you write a data processing pipeline component and plug it right into Spring Cloud Dataflow along with other Java components. So somehow capturing that, I think, would be useful.
Yeah. Okay. Agreed. All right. I'll start here. And this, as these things grow and they prove to be, pretty information centric, it's like the data or the event streaming one. If we start writing that and it just kind of gets out of hand, but it's really good information, then it could easily become its own chapter. So none of this is really set in stone right now. So I'll use these as more or less placeholders because I think that's Dave, I think you're totally on. And I feel like this kind of sets up the project for future, right? As they move into the future and you get more event streaming-esque and things like that. I think these are good things to have, good call out. Cool, you good with that? Any other thoughts?
No, I think that's great. And yeah, so enough said, I think. Good.
Cool. Okay. So now the moment of truth. Who wants their name on what? And again, I'm not a fan of this.
Hey,
I feel like I'm back in waterfall.
David, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to leave right now because I don't want my name on
Yeah,
it.
no, I should expect that. Yep. I should expect that from Tillman, no less, of course. Dave smells assignments and he's gone.
Let me just say that I am more than willing to chip in and help. So if that helps move the book along and whatever.
And that's exactly what I'm looking for. I feel like we're just, this is caught up in some sort of process that Packet has, but if I have anything to say about it, it's like everybody's going to put in, and there's just no sense in assigning names to things. But like I said, he's just dead set on it. So I'm going to open up by saying we'll just put Dave's name on everything because he knows about everything, right? That seems like the logical way. Anybody disagree with that?
It's absolutely not true. So the more and more this goes on, this project goes on, the less and less I know about it. It seems like.
Is he going to track us down? Is that what? Okay, if you just need a name there, you just put a random name. I don't think that's so wrong either. It's the other extreme, but it just seems just as reasonable.
I think. Oh no, I'm turning my camera off. That's not good. I think he just wants a name there. I think that ultimately, before the book gets published, there may be some legalities because they are publishing a book and such. But I don't think I just don't think it's going to be that sensitive, the legalities of it. Plus, I mean, if I heard correctly, their intention is to sell this for profit. So they're going to list this on Amazon and some other places and sell it. And so all of the contributors, which this is putting your name on the list, all of the contributors would get a piece of all the sales. And we all know this book is going off the shelf quickly. So, all right, I'm just going to run through this again. Don't feel like you're signing up for something huge or whatever. But who wants bootstrapping? Okay, good. Tim.
Well, I was just going to say that I don't know that I have any time to work on this, so I don't really want to put my name on anything.
I know. Well, okay, so here's the thing. If you guys are feeling like, this is just not the right way to do this, and putting names on stuff like nobody's comfortable with this, because quite honestly, I'm not crazy about it. But if you guys are really of that mindset and you want to push back, I'm happy to. And just tell them dude, if you have to have names on this stuff, then I don't think this project's going to go forward. I'm more than happy to take that stance with them because I'll bet you anything, suddenly it's not going to be a requirement.
Well, I
Yeah,
think
I was
prefer
just gonna
that?
say, I can.
oh, sorry. Go ahead, H.
I was gonna say I can volunteer for maybe management and streams because that's fresh on my mind, and it's not, it'll help to, I want to see this book done, and thank you for taking the effort and making this happen. But yeah, I kind of fell off the radar a little bit here, but I can help with some things or more things, whatever's needed. I'll help. I'll make time.
Okay. Well, thank you. But do you guys feel like if your name's getting put on this, you're signing up for something?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what's the issue, right? So
Because I can understand that.
we all have lots of other things, you know. Jason puts a lot of stuff on us, and so and we have to deliver, and so
Okay.
you know, this is just like one more thing that's being put on us to try to hammer out. Maybe I don't know, would people feel better if there were 2 names on it or 3 names, you know, in other words, a group of contributors to it? You know, I feel feels a little heavyweight if just one person owns a chapter.
What I told him was in Slack, he's in the Steeltoe Slack, and I said in that Steeltoe Book channel, most of the names in there are potential contributors. That's why they're in that group, in that channel. So there's your list. And I think everybody's going to put in on a lot of different stuff, right? I mean, I know some of the stuff is top of mind, but it's like, I think we all kind of maybe have an understanding of a lot of different stuff. And so, like I said, I'm just not a fan of putting someone's name on each chapter.
I think, you know, I think there ought to be a primary owner of each chapter. I think that totally makes sense. You can't have like 5 people trying to contribute to one chapter and expect it to be coherent in the end completely. So maybe somebody, you know, steps as the primary, but that doesn't mean they have to write all the content, you know, that there's a primary and then, you know, who's kind of the editor plus also a contributor, and then, you know, try to get as many other people to contribute in each chapter.
Well, that's a good point.
I mean, I don't know.
So what do you guys think about that? I mean, you know, it is yet another thing on your plate, though. Let's be real.
Yeah, it is.
Well, it is something else on a plate, but we also have sort of a charter too at large to kind of promote the Steeltoe, you know, brand of the product in form of blogs and things. So it seems to fall under that umbrella. So there is a business case for it, perhaps.
I mean, if you've got an OK or anything around that, this should check it off. Of course, I don't know how all that VMware stuff works, so, you know.
I think it's
okay.
good for the team to have this out there. I think we should. I mean, I don't see why. But I'm going to leave it up to the guys to decide. You know, I'm not going to put it on them. They have other things they can focus on too. But I think this is a good opportunity for everyone to be a part of something that would be very nice to get out there. So I encourage them to be involved, but I'm not going to, you know, enforce if they don't want to do this. That's fine. But
yeah, understood.
Same time, they do have requirements to engage in you know, some goals are to engage in the community, and this is definitely would satisfy part of that.
We have some domain experts on various parts of this, so I could say that I could help with this and that, but ultimately we still have to go back to the domain expert and get their time.
Well, okay, so here's what I'm going to ask. In the Steeltoe Book channel, you'll find, I haven't pinned this, but you'll find a link to the doc that I'm showing you, the outline that I'm showing you, right? Now that you understand the layout or the approach that we've taken with things, if you feel comfortable being a part of one of the chapters, go in and tag yourself. But like Jason said, don't feel obligated to do it. But if you feel comfortable and you want to raise your hand, cool, go for it. We'll cover it, and you know, we'll get everything done regardless. But I completely understand if somebody's not comfortable signing up for something. I really, really understand that. Sound cool?
Cool.
Sounds good.
Okay, so Steeltoe Book channel. Go in there. Anyway, so things are progressing. It is a bit slow. I have been clear with the lock that this is not my day job. This is not any of your all's day jobs, writing this book. He understands that. And so we check in every once in a while on Slack, and he just kind of pushes me along to make things, but we're kind of moving along in bite-sized chunks, because I think in a project like this, that's the only way that you're going to get it done. And it's going to take some time, but we'll get it done. Okay, that's it for book.
Hey, what do you mean tag yourself? Like just comment on there, or?
Yeah, just put your name there.
Okay.
The doc's probably, I mean, it's not like an internal like VMware doc, so it doesn't know your domain name or anything. So just tag your name on there.
All right. Anything else around the book, guys? Any questions or stuff for David? All right.
Just one thing quickly, David, it's great that you're championing this. We appreciate it. Just give you a slap on the back for doing
Thank you,
good
Dave.
stuff. Appreciate it.
And I appreciate it that you appreciate it, Dave. Thank you.
Love it.
All right. I did put the blog link in, so the website's up to date. If you go to steeltoe.io, it now has all the updated information around and has the blog on there. So please take a look. Let's see what else we got going here. Bootstrap. Tim, do you have some time to discuss, what Bootstrap is and how it helps?
Yeah, sure. So at its core, Bootstrap is an extension method that makes it dead simple to add Steeltoe to your application. It either directly calls host builder extensions that we already had in a lot of the Steeltoe projects, or it uses the same logic that's found in those extensions. So, I mean, I can pull up the documentation and it's just .add Steeltoe is all there is to it. And it goes and it looks for Steeltoe assemblies in your project references. And if it finds them, it adds them. Pretty straightforward.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Tim, is it scanning the directory in which the app is deployed and it's looking for assemblies by name, or how does it work?
Yeah, that sounds about right. I actually pull up the source code if that would help.
No, you don't have to. I'm just
Okay.
seeing.
Yeah, I believe that's exactly what it does. The actual implementation of it, we plugged in a couple of months ago, so I don't have it in the forefront of my mind, the exact line by line of how we go through it. We're definitely interested in,
too, right?
yes. Yeah, Andrew Stackhoff did the initial implementation. Originally, we were only using those host builder extensions directly. The last round of revisions resulted in, there were a few cases where, for example, the random value configuration provider didn't have a host builder extension for it. So we still wanted to add that support. It's really pretty simple. The host builder extensions a lot of times either call .configure app configuration or .configure services. So we just called those methods since we were working with a host builder anyway.
Tim,
There's
does it add any like app settings.json configure, like any defaults if they don't exist, or it doesn't do anything with app settings?
It doesn't do anything with your app settings JSON files or any other configuration files or anything that would be found in the standard default config builders. It's just dealing with Steeltoe libraries.
Okay.
So it's kind of expecting you to have your default builder, whether that's Microsoft's default builder or your own company's internal version of a default host builder.
Okay, good.
Most of the time, we usually in the options objects add the defaults right there. So when there is not an options, the default is in there, as opposed to adding something in the configuration before in the host builder or something, except the stream stuff, which we haven't done, which if we did that, then it would do some more stuff.
So it sounds like we need to be consistent. H, is that what you're saying? We're not. So like take management, for example, which I know you know pretty well. You don't have to have, if you just include steeltoe.management, whatever, in your project build, and it's there on disk, at startup time, if you use this Bootstrap, we'll see that assembly and it will auto configure itself properly so that the user doesn't have to have something in app settings.json.
Well, it has some defaults, but for example, it defaults to /actuator, and it has the default exposure settings and so on. That's coming directly from options, whereas and we do a little better job there, especially on Cloud Foundry and things like that. But when we did the streams, we've done it quite a bit differently with because there was more involved in making that happen than just an options object. So there is a little difference, but when we do add the Bootstrap to the streams, I guess, however that's going to be, then we'll have to solve the problem there.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think the user expectation would be, if I use the Bootstrap, that I get a set of default configuration values that go along with whatever Steeltoe assembly I've added in there. Like, for example, management. I'm going to get a well understood, well defined set of configuration that just works. And I don't have to go in and put something in app settings.json.
Yeah, well, and because it builds on all of the standard extensions that we already have, all of the defaults that we already include out of the box in the code are still there. So the management stuff should all work. For example, specifically, if you wanted to deploy to Cloud Foundry and have all of your actuators light up, that works with just the .out Steeltoe. All of that just works. You shouldn't need any app settings to deploy to Cloud Foundry and get actuators.
What would be cool, I mean, I get each component is introducing its own defaults. In Bootstrapper, what might be cool is to have the notion of profiles. And so the Bootstrapper, you tell it a profile is like development or staging or production, I don't know, something like that. And because of that, the Bootstrapper is smart enough to go in and augment defaults for the components that you've loaded, given that you're in I'm thinking about endpoints. Right, locking down endpoints. So if you give Bootstrapper production, then it's going to lock it all down, and it knows how to do that. But then if you give it a profile of local or development or something, then it opens them all up and makes it all available by local host. That'd be kind of cool. Or maybe it just looks at ASP.NET environment and does it there or something.
Sounds like you should file a feature request.
That's a good idea.
Whatever.
It's a good idea, David. We want to be opinionated and then also, but allow for them being users to be able to override those opinions, but have a well-defined, well set of opinions that work.
Yeah, Bootstrapper might be that thing. Yeah.
Dave, is that aligned to that Bootstrap thing you were talking about the other day, with like the Bootstrap YAML thing that you were mentioning? Would that align somewhere to that, you think, or no?
No, that's a different thing. That's a Spring Boot concept that is more for just configuring the initial startup.
Oh, right.
That really isn't specific to. So it configures something. In a way, I guess, yeah, it kind of does, Jason. It does somewhat overlap. Yeah. The more I think about it, it's definitely an area we need to explore more. Mm-hmm. We need to continue on with this concept that Andrew gave us, which is the bootstrapping idea, and continue to grow that as a feature of Steeltoe, to just make it so simple it'll also help drive some of the work Chris is doing with the initializer, making it really easy to auto configure things with Initializr and getting starting points. So
Actually, so I'll pour a little fuel on that fire because it is top of mind for me. A little project, microservices project that I'm working on is modernizing old framework applications or into .NET Core microservices. So we're far enough along now that we needed to introduce data migrations into it. So these applications are running on AWS. They're using Elastic Beanstalk as the deployment platform. And then they're all deployed by very elaborate pipelines in Azure DevOps. So I use tasks, and I brought tasks into optionally into the pipeline and in the application. And it was a very nice fit. I mean, my only rigging really was in the pipeline that I had to do, but it was a very nice fit introducing tasks into the application. And then the key thing was the data context. It used the same data context as the application used. So it became a very clean thing, very low code for me to have to run my data migration tasks and then run the application after that. And I feel like, Dave, going towards that bootstrappy, opinionated way of doing things, adding in the option to, here's the task that I want to run. It extends iTask. Pretty easy to do. That would be nice.
cool. Yeah, I like it.
All right. And Tim, I also have a line item here for Open Telemetry. Want to give any updates there about what work you have been doing there?
Yeah, so before I started working on this, Steeltoe was depending on version 0.20 alpha, I think, of OpenTelemetry for the 3x line. So that's obviously getting a bit dated now. But there was a bit of a challenge when OpenTelemetry ships their 1.0.0 GA release of the core components back at the beginning of this year. They actually dropped their metrics support. And it seemed like the best way forward for us was to adopt the newer versions of the core APIs and just kind of temporarily bring in the older versions of the metrics. So for anybody using Steeltoe 3.0 and wanting to upgrade to 3.1, all of the metric stuff should be exactly the same. And there will unfortunately be a couple of minor breaking changes around just the extension methods that get used to configure tracing. It should be really minor. The only additional thing you'll have to do is add a NuGet reference for a Zipkin package or whatever exporter you want to use. We were also able to kind of reduce our code footprint with a lot of the tracing stuff. The instrumentation packages and a lot of the hosting and setup work is now provided by the OpenTelemetry APIs. So we're able to just do a couple of method calls and provide some Steeltoe opinions on top of functionality that is provided by OpenTelemetry. And one of the nice things it does for you is that it automatically sets your application name using the same rules that we use throughout Steeltoe to have a unified definition of what your application is called for external services. So that part should just work automatically. I think that's the short version of things that changed with OpenTelemetry.
Thank you. All right. And then we had Chris. Do you want to give a lot of changes happening on Initializer? New dependencies, architecture changes, and do you have a demo? I think you wanted to show. Yeah. Anything you want to start there? Are you around, Chris? There you are. Okay. You're on mute.
Yeah, I figured that out after a minute or so. So arrange my screen for a moment. So we're looking at here. On the left side of the screen is the Initializer. And on the right side, I have a couple terminals open that I'll fiddle around with in a moment. Just a quick walk through the Initializer for those who are not familiar. The intent of the Initializer is to be able to quickly give you a working application or a working project that has some aspects of Steeltoe sort of pre-wired for you and pre-coded, so you can get you off the ground running a little bit more quickly. There's these three sort of metadata fields, a name and namespace and a description. The namespace is what your project is going to be called. It's also the top level namespace of the project. The name is the name of the file that's going to get downloaded. Oftentimes the name and the namespace is the same. Description is just a comment we're going to stick in your CS project file. Then the Steeltoe versions and .NET frameworks, those make modifications to your CS project file to adding certain package references and version properties. Then where if you were just to kind of use the default, let's look at that down the bottom here. We have sort of three actions that you can perform. One is to generate, and what that will do is that will generate a project for you and download it. And Explore is the same thing, except instead of downloading it, it's just going to open up a tree explorer. So let's take a look at that. By the sort of default project with no dependencies added is very much like a default project if you were running the .NET new Web API, the Web API template that comes from Microsoft. It's going to be the weather forecast application. And so this looked very familiar if you've ever done anything like that before, but there's nothing Steeltoe specific in this particular project yet. So we have this idea of extending that template with what we're calling right now dependencies. And for example, I can maybe select, I want to add a Docker file to my project. When I explore, I'll see now that there's now a Docker file been added. And so if I download this project, I'll have a Docker file, and it kind of saves me that step. One thing, so let's go and take a look at what's happening behind the scenes here. So on the right here, I have a Docker Compose set up that will run all the components on my my laptop here that enable me to run, basically run a fully fledged initializer. If you look at the URL up here of my initializer, it's running on my machine. And if you're not familiar with Docker Compose, there's this incubator project, which is whole sole purpose is basically create a Docker Compose file to do what you're looking at right here. And the way Docker Compose works is that you define some number of applications or services, and that's what these are here. So I have a net core tool service, initializer config server application, Initializer API, and so on. And it gives instructions for Docker how to launch that particular container and whether I need one of them or multiple of them. So it's a pretty common tool. And over here on the right, you see the output when you actually do run Docker Compose. You can kind of see it intersperses all the output from these containers in one standard out stream, which is nice, and it color codes it for you and gives you a little prefix saying from what container that particular message is coming from. Right now, if we just go ahead and explore, we don't see anything happening because in our applications, where all the debug level, all the logging level is set to info. So we're going to enable some debug logging here. And to do that, I have a couple options I can do. Since in this Docker Compose, I expose all the ports for the services, so I could connect to it just from my laptop as a local port. Or there's an additional container that gets deployed that is sort of a CLI tool. I'm going to use that one. So this is going to connect to the container, and it's called, the application itself is a Initializer CLI. And in here, and the reason I'm using this because it has some examples I can just cut and paste. It's going to help me a little bit. What I want to do is to enable some debugging here. And I'll talk about how this debugging magic works in a moment.
You're using Steeltoe to build your application, right?
That's correct. I'm going to show how that works in a sec here. So now if I go ahead and explore this, we should see, here we go, some debug messages coming out. And you can kind of see the sort of a manifestation of the protocol between the web UI and the Initializer API. So the web UI is just a JavaScript application, and it's basically just a thin skin, and it's just on top, or it sends requests to a backend service that is called the Initializer API. And the protocol of that was sort of defined by the Spring team. And we use that same protocol to describe what an application looks like. And that has allowed us to basically take, if you ever want to look at the Spring initializer, you would, like I see here, you know, it's very similar, or the Steeltoe, I should say, is very similar to the Spring one. And that's because we basically used their web API and just made it, you know, branded it for Steeltoe and changed a few fields around. And so it kind of saves us a lot of work to be able to do that. But you can kind of see some of the things that come through. These are all the values that we specified in our specification here. So if I actually want to change this to maybe something different here. You can see how the namespace is coming down as food art bar. So what you're looking at here is just the API service responding to requests from the UI. So the question is then, since this is a little bit of an aside, but it talks about some of the technologies that the Initializer API is using, and I think the best way to look at that is to actually add some dependencies to an application here, the two that the Initializer API uses. One of them is dynamic logging. That allows us to change logging levels on the fly. And the other one is management endpoints. And let's go take a look at what this application looks like. But what we have in our project here, we have 2 Steeltoe packages that give us the implementations necessary. In our, let's see, in our program.cs, we can kind of see where the dynamic logging has been added for us. And then startup, we see where the actuators kind of get added. So there's all the actuators get added here to configure services, and then they get mapped, all the endpoints get mapped a little farther down the line. And so that is basically the amount of code that was necessary to add to Initializer API to get the functionality we just saw right there, which is just being able to dynamically change debugging levels on the fly. Let's see. So let's take a look at another way to generate an application using Initializer, and that is not using the web UI at all. We're using a CLI approach, and we're going to issue HTTP requests directly to the Initializer API. And I'm going to use a tool, HTTP Pi, which is kind of a modernized version of curl. We can take a look at what this might look like. Let's see, management, generate a project. So I'm just going to issue, this is all the magic required. And I didn't download it, but you can see that when the response from the server was that there's this sample.zip that was going to be attached. And if I wanted to, I could download it, unzip it, and build a project. What's interesting here, if you look at the request that went into the server, you'll see the same sample for the name, the same sample for the namespace and description that we saw back on the sort of default page here. And that magic is provided to us by we leverage the Spring config server maintains a configuration for us of a UI. And that UI configuration contains things like what the fields that we're interested in, what the default values for those, what kind of fields are they to be rendered on the UI. And the way the Spring, so it's the config server is it's a service. It has, it's not a REST endpoint, but it's an HTTP endpoint that follows some conventions based on a URL. And you can have different backends. We use a GitHub backend, and it looks something like somewhere. This file right here. So this is in GitHub. And if you were to look at sort of the values in here, some of these would look familiar to you if you're also familiar with the initializer. Because you can see this is where all the information comes for what a description is, what the keys are, and also there's some other interesting pieces here too, like if there are constraints on a particular dependency, for example here. So the Azure Spring Cloud, the way you would read this dependency is that it must be greater than or equal to Net Core App 3.1, but less than Net 5.0. Similarly, down here for RabbitMQ, which we just added in RC2, you need a minimum version of the 3.10-RC2. And the way that manifests itself in the UI is that if I try to add a dependency, sort of like that, like these two down here, they're grayed out because I don't have the minimum requirements. And if I instead change my Steeltoe version, I can now select these and be very happy. On the request to the root of the API controller, when you do that, it returns a help back. So this is sort of like similar to the UI we just looked at on the website, but this is more for the CLI aspect of things, and shows you all the parameters, query parameters you can provide. In addition to, I mean, make this a little bit smaller so it fits. But you can also see, will tell you what the minimum requirements and the rules are for particular dependencies. So at the top two layers of the stack, the UI in the middle tier of the API, that's basically all the pieces that are involved. And the other part of there was also the config server, which is something that just acts as a liaison to a GitHub repository for the configuration. But that doesn't really talk about how these projects are actually being generated. And for that, we're going to go down to the bottom of the stack, and we'll kind of work our way back up for a moment and talk about the initializer, the templates for what we call the Net Core Tool templates. And all that somewhere. And if you're familiar with the .NET new CLI command, and this is the sort of template that you would be using. There's instructions here if you're interested in how to install a template, how to add the NuGet feed, and then how to install a template. And if you were to do this from the command line, it would look something like new install templates.
Chris, would you mind just quickly showing what a template looks like?
The project or the generated, or the in other words, you want to look at the source code behind the templates itself, or do you want to look at a project that was generated with a template?
Yeah, just the template itself, the source code of the template itself. I'm interested to see, like,
Sure.
how would I take one of those dependencies?
If you wanted to add additional dependencies, is that what you're asking?
Sure.
Yeah. So here's the repository. I have started to put together a developer document that talks about all the things that you need to do to sort of add a new dependency, what files to touch, how to create tests for that. But the actual project itself that gets generated is in this this project here, which is it's a project you can open in Visual Studio or Writer, anything like that. It uses there are plenty of tutorials out there on how to create templates, but we'll take a look at this one just to give you a sense of what lies in store for you. They try the sort of tenet behind the .NET Core tool templates is that you want to have a working application or working source code that you compile, and you can use your editor to get sort of feedback and command completion and things like that. So in the case of C#, the way you sort of toggle bits of code on and off are using the tried and true pound if defs. And the .NET templating engine is smart enough when you specify an option. Like, let's go take a look at specifically one that might be pretty clear. So there is an option, and I go here, .NET new Steeltoe Web API help. There is an option here for, say, hosting Cloud Foundry. And what happens is the way this project has been set up, that option will make this variable right here on the left side of the screen at line 72. I'll make that thing true, which will then trigger the template engine to include this using statement. So that is just one small example of the kind of things you have to do to kind of get your template logic in order. And there's probably some another couple files in here worth taking a look at while we're in here. So this directory here, template config, is where all the metadata and all your configuration for a template goes. This template.json file is where you sort of define all your like, let's take a look at the one we were just looking at. I did keep them in alphabetical order. So it says, like, here's the option. And when you look over here on the right side of the screen, you can see what the help message is for it, what type it is. That comes from this particular file on the left here, where you have sort of configured it. Though a couple pieces that then need to be sort of associated with this option are how to tell the CLI version of the .NET tool command, what the option name is actually to someone if they're to do like the switch statement, and also how to tell IDEs how to render a particular option. So if we go back up again, there is an .NET CLI host file, which has in it the mapping of in this case, the Cloud Foundry here variable to what the switch statement value is going to be. And similarly, there is an IDE host. This is used by Rider and by Visual Studio to help create a nice, in fact, I'll show you that in a second. But we can see here, again, here's the value, and then this is some IDE specific information. And let's take a look at the, so here is, I got a little Windows virtual machine here. I start up Visual Studio Code, and I'm just going to go ahead and create a new project. So the recent versions of Visual Studio Code are .NET template aware. So if you install a .NET new template, you'll be able to reference that template when you're creating a new project. And I happen to know that the Steeltoe template is way down the bottom here somewhere. There we are. Nice little logo and everything. So this is the template. This is the same exact template that's being used by the Initializer. And I go ahead and create my project, and you'll see now this is where all those options that we were looking at before, how they pop up. And you can, this way, before we added a Docker file, this is how you would add it here. You can go ahead and create your project. So that's the template, the .NET templating work that we've done in a nutshell. We will be making that, we'll probably releasing that probably in the relatively near future. Now we're talking weeks at most, I would say. So then the final piece of this puzzle is how does the Initializer API actually run run and generate the templates. And that is a new service, a kind of experimental thing, but I kind of like it. It's called the Net Core Tools service. And let's go ahead and get back into the CLI here. And let's take a look at the things you can do with the Net Core Tool service. So what it's kind of taking the .NET new command we were just fooling around with and making it available to an end user in the form of a REST endpoint. So let's go and take a look at the help. All right, so let's go ahead. So I want to also enable debugging there as well, so we can see things. I'm going to enable 2 levels of debugging. First is just add some debugging so you can see that anything in the controllers may be logging, and also enable the logging debugging in this library that we're using that actually runs the system commands for me. So we can see the command, the .NET command that's being run in the output and things like that. So I've enabled debugging. Let's go ahead and generate a quick project here. And the way the format of this endpoint works is that API new is the fixed part of the URL, and then after that comes the name of a template. So the web API is the one that the Steeltoe Initializer uses. You can see in the top here, we're actually running this .NET new command with some options at that are kind of, in this case, a default. And you can actually, like, if you notice up here that the .NET Restore was running that project, which kind of makes it run a little bit more slowly because it's actually resolving all packages. So we can actually just go ahead and turn that option off by passing it here. And now we can see the actual command. And if you want to go, well, what options are available to me, we can actually get help for this template. And it returns the output of the help to the end user. And finally, the other thing, this next feature, you can actually install templates on the fly to the service. And this was sort of because I wasn't quite sure how we were going to be deploying the Steeltoe templates. I put this in here just in case we needed it. But there's an endpoint under the new called NuGet. You give it a NuGet ID, and you can do a put to that URL. And we'll see that it is actually running the install for that particular nugget. Might take a second or two for it to download. And then the output of that are all the templates that were installed because of the, in that nugget. Nuggets and templates are not one-to-one. A nugget will have one or more templates in it. So these were the nuggets, the templates that were just installed. And we similarly can go ahead and delete that too to kind of put it back to the original state. So those are all the components sort of at a high level and how they interact to do the magic that is the initializer. So I think for being sort of, let's stop sharing my screen for a moment, unless someone in particular wants to see something. But the web version of the initializer is something that's very Spring familiar. The .NET templating portion of it is something that would be more familiar to a .NET developer or a Visual Studio developer. And this .NET Core Tool service is somewhere in the middle. It's not an exposed service right now when we deploy it, so you can't route to it, you can't use it, but it is part of the magic that is creating the projects for us. And with that, I think I'm done.
Thanks, Chris. That was awesome.
That was amazing, Chris. I got an idea. So my thought there is with Initializer, that's pretty darn hard to consume all that, right? And that's probably why you guys host start.steeltoe.io. But you've got the Docker Compose file, and that's good, right? That kind of wires things up, but it still leaves a little bit to be had. I have been playing around with Helm charts recently and writing a few charts, and this seems like a perfect candidate for that, for making a Steeltoe Initializer Helm chart where you can wire up everything and then put in the values for the Helm chart, you can build in some options. So then it becomes, for the consumer, it just becomes a little more straightforward YAML. You there? Did you lose me? Hey.
I hear
Chris? You. Okay. Did you get all that?
I think we lost Chris for some reason.
Yeah, we lost Chris. Okay, well, anyway. Oh, there he is.
I'm sorry, so this all that because I lost my internet connection apparently.
Oh, all right. So like a Docker Compose.
The Docker Compose file.
Okay, so that the Docker Compose is good and it's nice, but the reality is I think the Docker Compose is meant more for local and just getting it all going on your desktop, that kind of thing. I'm thinking about something that's a little more distributable, a little more consumable in higher environments, and a Helm chart in this case really feels like a good way to do that, because I think you could. There were a lot of configuration points that I saw there. A lot of possibilities of good things, and a lot of them are opinionated to who is going to be using Initializer, or if you're going to put it internally or whatever. Now, obviously, Helm has the hard dependency of Kubernetes on it, but a Helm chart would be a great thing because you could take all of your knowledge that you just showed us, put it inside a chart, and then put a values file on it. Yeah,
I do like that idea. You are correct that the Docker Compose there was really the workspace is an incubator project, and it's more largely just for me to make it easy to start and stop these things locally. We do deploy all this in our clusters that are Kubernetes clusters, and so when you look going on the public version, those are running in Kubernetes, and we have manifest obviously, and we deploy them in our pipelines. But the idea of a Helm chart is kind of tasty.
Because see, the thing is, you could, quite honestly, like if you did this as a Helm chart, I would have no need for a Docker Compose anymore, because Helm is all, Helm is just CLI based, right? It's not a repository per se anymore. You can host it all out of your Git repo. So you can make this, very consumable for the public and then I can have Minikube or whatever running locally, and that's how I can get my full initializer going.
Yeah, I guess so. I think functionally the chart and the Docker Compose are very similar. I guess it depends to what you're deploying. I guess the values part of the Helm chart, you said, might add a little more functionality there.
Yeah.
Regardless, I think
Well,
having it as an option is certainly worthwhile.
Yeah, I think a Helm chart would, I think making Initializer a Helm chart would make it very, very consumable. And you could bake in a lot of stuff that just doesn't matter, you know, well, to the rest of us, it doesn't matter. To you, it does.
Yeah, I think
So just a thought.
the two ends of the initializer are the ones where the end user really cares about, I think, and that's the web UI, and it's the actual .NET Core Tool template itself. Those are the pieces. The other part, all the other parts in the middle are right, more of interest to us. All the elastics involved.
Yeah, but consider that, because I think that the consumability of it right now is pretty tough. Right, you're just going to go to the UI or use that API.
No, I was taking advantage of this meeting to kind of give the team up to speed what we have. So it was intentionally technical.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, this was not an end user necessarily discussion. It would have ended up to 2 minutes.
All right. Well, anyway, consider a Helm chart, because I think it would be a nice thing. And I mean, I would imagine that if you had a Helm chart, you could dog food it, because you guys are on AKS.
What did Tim say before? It sounded like a feature request.
No, it didn't. No, just a suggestion. Do whatever you want with it.
David loves to file GitHub issues with feature requests. So it sounds like he's got another one coming.
Oh, God. Gonna have to start writing these down.
They're in the. I'm making notes, so they're in the community feedback section.
I will add that feature request myself and take credit as my own idea.
Perfect. Thank you. I don't want any credit.
But then you can't follow David.
I'll live. That's fine. I'll hit up Beardy McBeardster and ask him what's going on.
All right. Well, thanks, Chris. Anyone else want to have any discussions around the work you did or questions? Meeting's running a little over, so I want to make sure that everyone's had a chance to speak. Anything else you want to talk about before we go? No? Well, thanks, Chris and Tim and everybody really who contributed to the meeting today. I appreciate it. I'll put the recording out on our Steeltoe channel probably in a day or so. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.